Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Bobby Hammz here. Zack Snyder's Justice League, or what I believe history should remember it as, the Justice League, is a 4-hour epic that I found to be absolutely baffling. The movie's plot didn't befuddle me. It was quite easy to follow. The characters all made sense, their motivations all made sense, and the storylines all reached a crescendo at the end that all made sense. And Snyder already revealed his ideas for Justice League sequels in 2017, so myself and millions of others around the world were already familiar with the 3-movie arc, more or less. I wasn't puzzled by the runtime either. Never thought to myself, oh no, 4 hours. How can I sit still and watch something that's 4 hours long? Who would ever do such a terrible, irresponsible thing? It's paced surprisingly well, and I think that's because it was slated to originally release as a 6-part series, something that's very evident with the insertion of chapters which would separate the episodes. No, I think the thing that confused me about Zack Snyder's Justice League was Warner Brothers' conscious decision to try to publicly bury this film like it was some dark family secret while refusing to acknowledge the reasons 2017's Justice League, or as I remember it, The Age of Garbage, utterly failed at everything when WB's DC Films tried to make a Disney movie. It's no secret that Disney Marvel is the originator of the shared cinematic universe. They did it first, and though I'm not a huge Disney Marvel fan anymore, I can't deny that they do it best. The MCU is bursting at the seams with bright and colorful movies that include a ton of action and somehow even more comedy. Because of that, they've been wildly successful at the box office and they're accessible to the general public. So it makes financial sense that every studio, Warner Brothers included, would want to copy the MCU. However, every other studio, Warner Brothers included, has struggled with their shared cinematic universes because they don't have a history of making movies with a singular demographic in mind. Disney does. Disney makes movies aimed specifically at children. They've been doing so since 1937's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Disney's animated movies were vibrant and attractive in their artwork, with quirky and comedic yet simple characters who made their way through easily understandable plots in order to tell a story. There were scary elements, but nothing was too frightening, and the bad guys rarely, if ever, won the day. With very few exceptions, namely Winter Soldier and Infinity War, which had a more serious tone throughout, Disney's live-action Marvel movies follow the same template as Disney's animated movies. Bright colors, action, comedy, uncomplicated characters, except Captain America in my opinion, and uncomplicated plots. Their process works, and the longevity in filmmaking, coupled with marketing to youngsters, has brought Disney generations of fans and customers. Loyalty, 100%. However, Disney's decades-long kid-friendly approach has also branded the company as a one-trick pony, incapable of venturing outside the confines of its adolescent pasture. For example, in 1979, Disney was going through a rough patch and produced a sci-fi movie, The Black Hole, in an attempt to appeal to an older, growing audience that had become highly interested in the sci-fi fantasy genre, no thanks to a little flash-in-the-pan film called Star Wars that released in 1977. You may have heard of it. Good Bad Flicks has a really great video about The Black Hole. You should check it out. Anyway, The Black Hole collapsed at the box office and was received poorly by critics. Disney, learning its lesson, went back to making animated movies through the 1980s, and their animated renaissance of the 1990s catapulted them back into the stratosphere. Then they bought Marvel Studios, then they bought Lucasfilm. The MCU gravy train, following that template of the animated movies, has been chugging along nicely for over a decade. But the Star Wars films have gone off the rails. I wonder why. And in a bizarre twist that I think helps prove just how tight the family-friendly label is stitched to the Disney name, their more realistic live-action remakes of their hit animated movies have generally been panned as boring and dull and hollow cash grabs. But Disney never again made another movie like The Black Hole because they realized, at least at the time, it wasn't what their audience wanted. And I'll circle back to that point later. I swear this video really is about Zack Snyder's Justice League. Warner Brothers isn't Disney. The four Warner Brothers, Albert, Harry, Jack, and Sam, made their first film in 1918, a silent war drama titled My 4 Years in Germany that was produced during World War I. Although the studio debuted Bosco, its first Looney Tunes character in the 1930 theatrical short Sinking in the Bathtub, Warner Brothers released its first animated movie, The Nutcracker Prince, in 1990. So Disney had a tiny 53-year head start in the animated movie race. Being so late to the meet, Warner Brothers eventually overcame that gap by simply trying to mimic Disney's animation style. Oh wait, no they didn't. Warner Brothers began with heady adult drama, and that's been their bread and butter for over 100 years. During that century, Warner Brothers has released every type of movie for every type of genre. Blade Runner, Sleepers, Lethal Weapon, Dunkirk, Mars Attacks, Mystic River, Blazing Saddles, The Matrix, and Zack Snyder's Justice League. None of those films could ever fit with the Disney model. Not even a franchise like Harry Potter, which skews more towards kids, would be accepted in the Mouse House because the series doesn't remain bright and bubbly to the very end. Warner Brothers didn't interfere with the various directors and allowed the Harry Potter movies to get dark and scary, and that hands-off approach ultimately paid off. The studio also gave Nolan a wide berth with his Batman trilogy, which showcased the stark contrast between the seriousness of The Dark Knight and the not-so-serious camp of Iron Man, or the gloom of The Dark Knight Rises with the incessant quips of the Avengers. There was a clear delineation of cinematic style and story substance. When Zack Snyder was given the go-ahead to launch Warner Brothers' DC shared universe with Man of Steel, he did so using Nolan's gritty, realistic prototype, one meant to appeal to adult audiences not interested in live-action cartoons. So, Snyder had a 5-movie plan for the fledgling universe, and Man of Steel garnered $668 million, meaning it made a profit for Warner Brothers DC. However, critics didn't like it, and it didn't make $1 billion. So, after just 2 movies, Warner Brothers forgot that it was a 100-year-old company founded on dramatic films and not Disney's copycat fanboy. They cut 30 minutes from Batman v Superman, rendering the theatrical release a disjointed hodgepodge of stuff that sort of just happened on screen, which again rubbed critics the wrong way, yet the movie made $872 million. Now, in math, 872 is larger than 668, and one could extrapolate that represents an increase, an upward trend, if you will, in the number of viewers. Unfortunately, 872 million isn't larger than $1 billion, and Warner Brothers really wanted to be like Disney. Therefore, they simply gave up on their own shared universe and sought to make standalone movies. Remember, kids, when events don't go exactly how you want them to go, the heroic thing to do is to give up. When tragedy struck Snyder and his family, he stepped away from the Justice League movie he had finished filming. Principal photography was all done, and what remained was to score the movie and complete the VFX and post-production. Warner Brothers could have delayed the movie's release until Snyder returned to finish everything, but the executives wanted their year-end bonuses, and they still wanted to be like Disney, so much so that they hired he who shall not be named to remake the incomplete Justice League like an MCU team-up movie, after he just got done making a terrible MCU team-up movie. And the runtime couldn't be more than 2 hours, just because. After cutting 75% of the footage Zack Snyder shot, removing most of the non-white actors, turning up the color saturation until everything looked like salmon, adding a pointless endangered Russian family in the final act, and including alleged jokes that were written for teenage boys suffering from chronic cringe, Justice League became a thing that critics panned and found no fans. I fucking hate that movie. No one liked it, and it grossed $657 million, less than Man of Steel, while costing the studio more money to make. For comparison, Wonder Woman released only 5 months before Justice League to very positive reviews, and it grossed $822 million, while being a serious movie with a muted color palette that was set during World War I. However, when Justice League premiered that November, the response was overwhelmingly negative and the financial backlash was swift. Fans had spoken. Warner Brothers isn't Disney. Then again, in the years leading up to Zack Snyder's Justice League, Warner Brothers would prove to the world that it finally became like Disney, but not the well-thought-out, fan-appreciative side of Disney Marvel. No, Warner Brothers morphed into the splitting image of the chaotic, egotistical, and toxic side of Disney's Star Wars. In 2015, The Force Awakens, directed by a lost creator, and I mean that in more ways than one, J.J. Abrams, was the first Star Wars movie to be released since 2005's Revenge of the Sith. That movie made over $2 billion. That's an impressive feat, considering The Force Awakens was just a rehash of that little flash-in-the-pan Star Wars movie from 1977. Many other folks have made that same observation, that Abrams seems unable or unwilling to tell an original and coherent story for large franchises. For more evidence, look at his copy and paste job, work on Star Trek Into Darkness. To me, The Force Awakens didn't make $2 billion. 38 years of pent-up nostalgia for Han, Luke, and Leia made $2 billion. A year later, Rogue One amassed a little over $1 billion. And although it was well received all around, it was still the prequel to Star Wars 77 and was therefore still riding the waves of yesteryear. But back to the main storyline, The Last Jedi, directed by Rian Johnson, was released in 2017 and made $1.3 billion. In math, $1.3 billion is less than $2 billion, an almost 50% swing in a decreasing, one might say, downward trend. That dramatic decline in ticket sales could be explained by audiences coming to realize the nonsensical plot holes and overall poor storytelling of The Force Awakens. Or it may have been because of the bad word of mouth due to The Last Jedi's nonsensical plot holes and overall poor storytelling. Regardless, the Star Wars fandom didn't care for The Last Jedi, and they voiced their opinions. Arbitrarily condemning the entire lot as toxic, executives at Disney Star Wars ignored criticisms about Luke's character assassination and labeled it as toxic masculinity, raised unearned Mary Sue abilities as sexist, Finn and Rose's dead-end side adventure as racist, and the most boring and slow-paced chase ever put to film as, oh my god, is it still going on? J.J. Abrams was brought back to direct The Rise of Skywalker. But first, Solo. Another prequel debuted to very mixed reviews and garnered a paltry $393 million, a number so low it stands alone at the bottom of the Star Wars franchise. Oh, it stands alone? Oh, I get it. Solo. The Rise of Skywalker, the final entry in the Disney Star Wars sequels, made slightly more than $1 billion and was liked even less than The Last Jedi. It was the Justice League of 2019, a movie haphazardly thrown together at the last minute because the studio's executives didn't have anything planned out. Additionally, these same Disney Star Wars executives chose to disregard constructive criticisms from the larger, sane portion of Star Wars fans and opted to focus on the loud, maniacal minority. You can see Disney Star Wars' erratic decisions reflected in Warner Bros. DC because neither of them knew what to do with their respective properties. Kevin Feige, a comic book enthusiast, had a plan for the MCU, and all of his decisions seemed like masterstrokes in creative genius. Zack Snyder, a comic book enthusiast, had a plan for at least 5 DC movies, but Warner Bros. Didn't give him Feige level of responsibility or trust because Warner Bros. Didn't trust themselves or have any idea where they wanted to go. They didn't like Snyder's style, but Wonder Woman, a movie heavily influenced by Snyder, was a resounding success. People hated Justice League, but didn't mind Shazam. Aquaman continued the Arthur Curry story that Snyder set up in a film Warner Bros. DC hacked to bits, but Aquaman made over $1 billion. And then Joker, a dark, dreary, depressing R-rated film about DC's iconic villain, made over $1 billion and won Joaquin Phoenix an Oscar. Similar to Snyder's original Justice League, Warner Bros. DC also tried to torpedo Joker by giving Todd Phillips a very small $55 million budget to work with. Send in the clowns? Cue the Warner bozos, am I right? During the time of all those aforementioned DC movies, fans worldwide had been bellowing release the Snyder Cut, something the studio refused to acknowledge existed. Using their contacts in the Hollywood trades and in the mainstream media, sources within Warner Brothers repeatedly stated that Zack Snyder's Justice League was not real. It was a boogeyman, an apparition, a fairy tale concocted by DC's toxic fans who attempted to will something into existence simply because they didn't like Justice League. And then some of the crew confirmed that way more footage was shot and VFX polishing had begun, but they were let go and none of their work ended up in the theatrical cut. Okay, well, maybe the Snyder Cut existed, but it was an incomplete assembly and there's a ton of work that would have to be done to it. And then Jason Momoa said he'd seen it. And then Kevin Smith talked about the deleted scenes and stills that he had seen. And then Zack Snyder himself outlined his 3 Justice League sequels while slowly trickling stills from his cut of the movie onto Vero. Okay. Maybe it could be completed, but Warner Bros. DC would have to pay for it, and that was not going to happen at all. Okay? It would never be released. Period. Get over it. Done. DC fans were telling Warner Bros., hey, we really like this product. Please, sir, some more? And Warner Brothers' response was, so what? We don't care what you like. That total lack of self-awareness about the business you're in was very similar to that one guy, Pablo Hidalgo, who mocked a YouTuber for getting emotional while watching Luke Skywalker's appearance on the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian. Dang, Pablo Hidalgo sounds like a real asshole. He must be part of that toxic Star Wars fandom that Disney Star Wars executives brought up anytime someone critiqued their sequel trilogy. Or, and really, hear me out on this, maybe Pablo Hidalgo is himself an executive at Lucasfilm under Disney Star Wars. Oops. Then, in 2020, a year no one wants to remember, an unusual series of events all coalesced. 3 months into a pandemic that shut down the planet as well as movie theaters, AT&T launched the streaming service HBO Max after buying Warner Brothers. In seeking exclusive original content for the fledgling service, the executives at AT&T called on Zack Snyder to show them his Justice League movie, much to Warner Brothers' chagrin. Impressed with what they saw and with no built-up animosity towards Snyder for not making movies like Disney, AT&T told Warner Brothers to let Zack finish his Justice League film. The Snyder Cut was officially given the green light to be released exclusively on HBO Max. Fans worldwide rejoiced. Executives at Warner Brothers DC were dismayed. They were so dismayed that Ann Sarnoff, CEO of Warner Media, said that there'd be no more Snyder DC movies headed to the theaters because of— want to take a guess at what her reasoning was? If you guessed because of toxic Snyder Cut fans, congratulations, you've just repeated history. Let me do a quick compare and contrast between Disney Marvel, Disney Star Wars, and Warner Brothers DC. No one at Disney Marvel ever talks about toxic fans, and the MCU is an undeniable success story. Is that because there aren't any toxic Marvel fans who demand that Feige tell the stories that they want and validate their theories? No, not at all. No one at Disney Marvel ever talks about toxic fans because Kevin Feige crafted a plan for the MCU and stuck with it through the ups and the downs. More importantly, because they trust the charted course, Disney Marvel executives don't waste their time focusing on and amplifying the vitriol coming from a small section of loons, nor do they point the finger to blame fans when a movie doesn't succeed as much as they would like. Disney Star Wars and Warner Brothers DC can't claim to practice such maturity, and their franchises are stalled or failing because of that. But if Feige were to somehow succumb to the dark side of the Star Wars or the anti-fan equation of Warner Brothers DC, what would he even call toxic Marvel fans? The Toxic Avengers? Instead of continuing with Snyder's remaining Justice League films, Walter Hamada put out a slate of DC Comics logos representing movies and shows, I suppose, that he wants to produce in the future. If this overpromise seems familiar to you, congratulations on experiencing deja vu. So lastly, similar to Disney Star Wars contention with Disney Plus, it appears Warner Brothers DC will be in contention with HBO Max. Walter Hamada will do his thing with the movies like Kathleen Kennedy did her thing with the Star Wars films, and perhaps Zack Snyder will do his own DC thing on HBO Max like Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau did their own Star Wars thing on Disney Plus. Fans were crying tears of joy because of what they watched on Disney Plus. Meanwhile, fans cried foul and then turned their backs on the Disney Star Wars movies. I wonder if history will repeat itself for Warner Brothers DC. Maybe, but maybe there's still a chance they get their act together and stop trying to copy Disney. I mean, it isn't as if Warner Brothers did something as ill-advised as, I don't know, hiring J.J. Abrams, the copy and paste director of Star Wars, to helm a bunch of DC movies, right? Right? Who cares? I'm probably just a toxic fan anyways. After watching Zack Snyder's Justice League, I was confused as to why Warner Brothers tried to publicly bury the film like it was some dark family secret. Zack Snyder's Justice League is dark, yet in the wake of Autumn's death, the movie is also surprisingly hopeful and centered around superpowered people who come together in a time of need, like a family. Now, it would have been easier for Warner Brothers if everyone had forgotten about the Snyder Cut, and Snyder faded away from sight as fast as Justice League. But the fans, those toxic fans, wouldn't let that happen, ironically because of how badly the studio treated Zack and his film in his time of need in 2017. Warner Brothers didn't know what to do with Snyder's vision in 2017, and they don't know what to do with Snyder's Justice League after its server-crashing premiere on HBO Max. They can't backtrack and agree to restore the Snyderverse. That would mean that they were wrong to ignore his ideas all along. So less than a week after the movie's release, Warner Brothers went full throttle putting out headlines, in the Hollywood trades of course, about casting big names for future DC projects in an effort to, once again, bury Zack Snyder's Justice League in the public arena. They don't want to acknowledge Snyder's popularity among DC fans or what those DC fans actually want to consume. Zack Snyder's Justice League is antithetical to the worldview of the current regime at Warner Brothers' DC film division. How can a 4-hour-long movie filled with so much doom, gloom, heartbreak, and violence get such a positive reception? How? Because Warner Brothers isn't Disney. DC fans know that, Disney knows that, yet since Man of Steel, somehow, someway, Warner Brothers DC is still the only one in the dark about that brazenly obvious fact. But that's not a secret. It's just sad. Thanks for watching.